Greater than Ryan, I'll be home this weekend. Dad said you're picking me up. My husband had mentioned it in passing over dinner, completely unaware of the tension that hid behind his simple request. You know the way better than me, he'd said, not even looking up from his phone. And I had smiled, pretending it meant nothing. But it meant everything. The drive to pick Ryan up felt heavier this time. Every mile carried memories I had tried to bury. When I saw him waiting by the campus gate, the same easy smile, the same warmth in his eyes, something inside me trembled. He placed his bag in the trunk and slid into the passenger seat. Hey, he said, his voice low, casual, almost too calm. Hey, I replied, gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. For the first half of the drive, we talked about simple things, classes, weather, traffic. But underneath every word was a silence filled with things we weren't saying. About an hour from home, the rain started again, soft, rhythmic, familiar. The same rain that had fallen the night everything between us changed. Ryan looked out the window, then said quietly, feels like déjà vu. Yeah, I murmured, staring at the road. He turned toward me. You've been avoiding me. I said. This isn't right. He nodded, but his gaze didn't waver. Maybe not, but it's real. That word, real, cut through me. Because it was. Every conversation, every stolen glance, every heartbeat that quickened when his name appeared on my screen, it was real. And I hated myself for how much that mattered. When we stopped for gas, I stepped out of the car just to breathe. The air was damp and cool, the smell of wet pavement grounding me for a moment. I told myself to pull back, to draw the line that should have been there from the start. But when I turned, Ryan was standing just a few steps behind me, his expression soft, searching. Don't look at me like that, I whispered. Like what? Like you understand me. Maybe I do. The words hung between us, suspended in the air like the mist after rain. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I could feel the weight of his presence, the warmth radiating even through the cool breeze. For one brief moment, neither of us moved, and yet, everything inside me was moving, unraveling. I took a shaky breath. We can't do this. I know, he said. But he didn't step back. It wasn't what he did that broke me, it was what he didn't do. He didn't reach for me. He didn't cross the space between us. He just waited for me to choose. And in that silence, filled with the soft patter of rain and the echo of my own heartbeat, I realized how far gone I already was. Because even without touching, we had crossed the line long ago. When we finally got back in the car, neither of us spoke. The drive continued in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was fragile, like the quiet after a storm, when everything is too still, too honest. By the time we reached home, my husband was outside mowing the lawn, waving casually as we pulled in. I waved back, my smile practiced, controlled. Ryan carried his bag inside, our eyes meeting one last time, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. That night, after dinner, I found myself standing by the window again, staring at the same rain that had followed us home. My husband was asleep upstairs. The house was quiet, peaceful, too peaceful. And all I could think about was the way Ryan had looked at me, the way his silence spoke louder than any declaration could. I didn't need to touch him to know we'd crossed a line. We already had, in our thoughts, our hearts, and in every moment we let our emotions wander where they never should have gone. It wasn't passion that haunted me. It was the truth that I had found a connection so rare and dangerous that it made the rest of my life feel pale by comparison. Sometimes, the biggest mistakes don't happen in moments of passion, they happen in moments of loneliness. I never planned for any of this, I was just a woman trying to reconnect with her family, trying to find herself again. But one unexpected trip, with my stepson, changed everything I thought I knew about love, guilt, and boundaries. This isn't a story about lust. It's a story about emptiness, temptation, and what happens when a heart starved for affection finally finds someone who sees it. So before you judge me, listen to my side. Because this trip didn't just change my life, it broke it, and somehow, it healed me too. Heartbreak. This is my anonymous confession, a trip with my stepson that changed our lives forever. I never thought one simple road trip could change the way I saw myself, or the people around me. When I married my husband 7 years ago, I believed I was stepping into a quiet life of predictability and peace. He was older, stable, a man who'd been through enough heartbreak to crave nothing more than calm. I thought I wanted that too. But calm, I would later learn, can sometimes feel like suffocation disguised as comfort. When he suggested that I drive his son, my stepson, back to college after the holidays, I didn't think twice about it. He'd caught a flu that weekend, and I was free from work. It's just a few hours on the road, I told him, trying to sound casual. I didn't even realize how much that drive would test every boundary I thought I had. My stepson, Ryan, was 21. Polite, funny in that sarcastic, understated way only young men seem to master, and surprisingly attentive for his age. We got along well enough during family dinners, exchanging light jokes and small talk. But that morning, as I waited by the car and he came out carrying his duffel bag over one shoulder, something in the air shifted. Maybe it was the way his shirt clung to his chest, or the way his eyes lingered a little longer than they should have when I said, "Ready to go." Whatever it was, I felt it, an energy, unspoken yet undeniable. The first hour of the drive was filled with laughter and music. We sang along to songs on the radio, teased each other about our terrible voices, and swapped stories about random things, his friends, my work, my husband's quirks. But somewhere along the highway, when the sky began to change from bright blue to a soft, honey-colored dusk, the mood turned quieter. He reclined his seat a little, looking at me from the corner of his eye. "You and Dad, you've been together a while now, huh?" he asked. 7 years, I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. "Do you ever get bored?" The question caught me off guard. I laughed softly, trying to brush it off, but his voice stayed in my head like a whisper I couldn't shake. Did I get bored? Of course I did. My husband was a good man, but our marriage had become a series of routines: coffee, work, dinner, silence, sleep. He rarely noticed new dresses, never touched me unless it was out of habit, and spoke more to his emails than to me. I felt invisible. When Ryan spoke again, it was softer this time. "You don't seem bored," he said. "You seem lonely." The words sank into me like a truth I hadn't dared to say aloud. Maybe that was what I was, lonely. A woman trapped between loyalty and longing. I didn't answer, just smiled faintly and changed the subject. But every mile that passed felt heavier, as though something was quietly unraveling between us. When we stopped at a small diner for dinner, the tension became something tangible. We sat across from each other in a dim booth, our knees almost touching beneath the table. His eyes lingered on me longer than they should have, and when he smiled, there was something in it, something that made my heart skip in confusion. After dinner, we got back on the road. The rain had started, tapping gently against the windshield, and visibility dropped quickly. We decided to stop at a roadside inn for the night. It wasn't planned, it just felt like the safer choice. At the reception, they told us only one room was available. I hesitated, but Ryan shrugged. "It's fine," he said. "It's just one night." And so, we took it. That night, as I lay on one side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, I could feel every inch of the distance, and every bit of the closeness, between us. My heart pounded with a strange rhythm, not from fear, but from something I couldn't name. His breathing was slow, steady, and for a moment, I wondered if he was asleep. Then, in the dim light filtering through the curtains, I saw him turn slightly toward me. Our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, charged, filled with everything we couldn't say. And that's when I realized, this trip wasn't just a drive. It was a mirror, showing me everything I'd tried to bury, the emptiness in my marriage, the longing I'd suppressed, and the dangerous, confusing emotions that had begun to stir inside me. When I finally closed my eyes, sleep didn't come easily. Because deep down, I knew that whatever happened after this night, whatever choices we made, nothing between us would ever be the same again. The sound of rain tapping against the window was the only thing that filled the silence that night. I remember lying there, the dim glow of the streetlight sneaking through the thin motel curtains, painting shadows across the walls. My heart wouldn't slow down. I told myself it was just exhaustion from the long drive, that the strange tension in my chest was nothing more than nerves. But deep down, I knew better. Something in the air had changed, something irreversible. Ryan was lying just a few feet away on the other side of the bed. I could hear his breathing, slow, calm, but not quite steady. He wasn't asleep either. The space between us felt heavy, like it carried every unspoken thought, every forbidden feeling that neither of us dared to voice. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "You can't sleep either, huh?" I forced a small laugh. "Guess not. The rain's too loud." "It's not the rain," he said softly. "It's Everything. I turned to face him then, and our eyes met in the half-dark. There was something vulnerable in his expression, something that made him look less like my husband's son and more like someone who understood me in a way no one else had. It terrified me. "Ryan," I whispered, "you should get some rest. We have a long drive tomorrow." He nodded, but he didn't look away. Instead, he said something that made my heart twist. "You deserve to be happy, you know. You deserve to feel seen." Those words broke me, because they came from someone who wasn't supposed to notice me that way. Someone who had nothing to gain from saying it. I wanted to respond, to tell him that I was fine, that my life was enough, but my throat tightened. For the first time in years, I couldn't lie to myself. When I finally turned away, closing my eyes, I could still feel his gaze. The sound of the rain grew softer, blending into the steady hum of my heartbeat. And somewhere between the tension and the silence, something fragile began to form, a connection that defied logic, reason, and everything I had promised myself I would never cross. The next morning, I woke before him. The sunlight had replaced the rain, streaming through the curtains, golden and too bright for how heavy my heart felt. I slipped out of bed quietly and stood by the window, watching the wet road outside. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman looking back. When Ryan stirred, I turned around quickly, pretending to fix my hair. He smiled, sleepy-eyed, that familiar mix of boyish charm and quiet confidence. "You didn't sleep much," he said. "Neither did you," I replied. "Yeah," he murmured, sitting up. "I was thinking about last night." My breath caught. "Nothing happened," I said quickly, my voice sharper than I intended. He nodded slowly. "I know, but it could have." The honesty in his tone unsettled me. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right. There had been a moment, fleeting but real, when everything inside me screamed for something I shouldn't want. We left the inn not long after, the air between us charged yet fragile. The drive felt different this time, quieter, more aware. Every time our eyes met, I felt a strange mix of guilt and curiosity, like we were both wondering what the other was thinking but afraid to find out. Halfway through the drive, he reached over to turn down the radio. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure," I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. "Are you happy with him?" It was a question that should have been easy to answer. Of course I loved my husband. He was kind, reliable, loyal. But happiness, that was different. I thought about the years of silence, the nights spent lying beside a man who barely noticed when I reached for him. I thought about how it felt when Ryan had said I deserved to feel seen. "I don't know anymore," I finally admitted. He nodded, his jaw tightening. "You should know. You deserve to." The rest of the drive passed in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. It was the kind of silence that says everything words can't. When we finally reached his campus, I parked the car and forced a smile. "Well," I said, trying to sound light, "we made it." He turned to me, his eyes soft. "Thank you, for everything." "For what?" I asked. "For being real." That night, after I returned home, I lay in bed beside my husband, staring at the ceiling in the dark. His steady breathing filled the room, familiar and distant all at once. I wanted to reach for him, to feel something, anything, but my body didn't move. Because all I could think about was the way Ryan had looked at me before he walked away, as if he knew something I didn't want to admit. Something that scared me. I told myself I would forget it, that what happened on that trip would stay locked away, untouched, unspoken. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had crossed an invisible line, not with my hands, but with my heart. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. When I got home that evening, I thought I could simply move on, pretend that the trip had been just another errand, another quiet act of kindness for my husband's son. But my mind betrayed me. Every moment replayed itself. The look in Ryan's eyes, the words he said, the silence we shared that spoke louder than any confession ever could. For the next few days, I went through the motions like nothing had changed. I made dinner, smiled when my husband spoke about his meetings, and kept my thoughts buried deep under layers of normalcy. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, that invisible thread between me and Ryan wouldn't break. It lingered, in the way my phone lit up late at night, in the way my heart reacted before my mind could catch up. It started with a text. "Greater than Ryan, made it back safely. Thanks again for the ride, and for listening." It was harmless enough. A polite thank you. I typed back quickly. "Greater than me, of course. I'm glad you're safe. Study hard." I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. The next night, another message came through. Greater than Ryan, do you ever think about that night? I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, every rational part of me screaming not to answer. But curiosity, that dangerous, intoxicating curiosity, won. Greater than me, I try not to. His reply came almost instantly. Greater than Ryan, so you do. I sat there in bed, my husband already asleep beside me, feeling my pulse quicken. The glow from my phone screen illuminated the room, and I realized just how close I was to crossing another invisible line. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Over the next few days, our messages became more frequent. They started innocently, jokes, random thoughts, bits of his day. But slowly, the tone shifted. He asked about my life, my dreams, my regrets. And I found myself telling him things I'd never told anyone, things my husband never cared to ask. Greater than Ryan, you sound lonely. Me, maybe I am. Ryan, you shouldn't be. You're too amazing to feel alone. Those words burned into me. Not because they were inappropriate, but because they were exactly what I'd been starving to hear. For years, I'd been invisible, a shadow in my own marriage. And suddenly, someone saw me again. I began waiting for his messages. I'd find myself checking my phone during work breaks, smiling at the little notifications that popped up. Each one was a spark, small, fleeting, but enough to remind me I was still capable of feeling something. But with every message, the guilt grew heavier. Every good night text felt like a betrayal whispered in the dark. I started deleting our chats, terrified that my husband might see them. But no amount of deletion could erase the truth. I didn't want to stop. One evening, a week after that trip, Ryan sent a picture of a sunset from his dorm window. Greater than Ryan, reminded me of that night on the road. The way the light hit your face. I froze, my chest tightening. I knew that message crossed a line. He knew it too, but instead of setting a boundary, I typed back, slowly, deliberately. Greater than me, you notice too much. Ryan, only when it comes to you. That was the moment I realized how deep I'd fallen. What started as innocent conversation had become something else, a quiet emotional affair that was growing stronger by the day. I tried to distract myself by focusing on my husband, by cooking his favorite meals, planning little surprises, pretending to care about his endless work calls. But it felt forced, mechanical. He didn't notice the effort anyway. And every time I glanced at my phone, I felt a strange comfort knowing Ryan was just one message away. Then one night, as I sat alone in the kitchen scrolling through my phone, another message came in. Greater than Ryan, can I see you? My heart stopped. I typed and deleted my reply several times before finally sending. Greater than me, Ryan, that's not a good idea. He didn't argue, just replied. Greater than Ryan, okay. I understand, but I'll still want to. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake beside my husband, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, the same rhythm I'd once found comfort in but now barely noticed. My mind was miles away, replaying every word, every message, every emotion that had begun to take root in the cracks of my loneliness. I told myself it was harmless, that nothing physical had happened. But I knew better. The danger wasn't in what we had done, it was in what we were thinking about doing. The anticipation, the longing, the silent connection that had grown stronger than touch. And as I finally drifted off, one thought echoed in my mind, quiet, haunting, undeniable. It wasn't the night at the motel that changed everything. It was what came after. The secret messages, the stolen emotions, the hunger I'd spent years pretending I didn't have. And the worst part, I didn't want to stop. The days that followed were a blur of ordinary moments shadowed by extraordinary guilt. I tried to convince myself that everything was under control, that our messages would eventually fade into silence, that I could still go back to the woman I was before that road trip. But the truth was simpler, and much harder to accept. I didn't want to go back. It had been nearly 2 weeks since I dropped Ryan off at his campus when he texted again. And as I turned off the light that night, one thought whispered in the back of my mind, soft, guilty, but honest. Sometimes, crossing the line doesn't require a single step. Just a feeling you can't unfeel. It's strange how the most unforgettable moments of our lives often end quietly. No explosions, no scenes, just silence heavy enough to echo for years. That's how our goodbye felt. No one else would have sensed anything unusual that morning. But inside me, everything was breaking, shifting, and finding its way toward a truth I didn't want to face. The trip was over. The laughter, the long drives, the stolen glances, all of it now belonged to memory. I woke before him that last morning, the early sun creeping across the hotel curtains. He was still asleep, one arm draped over the pillow, his chest rising and falling slowly. I remember staring at him for a long moment, memorizing the quiet innocence that had once existed between us, before lines blurred, before hearts tangled. In that silence, I felt both love and regret tug at me like tides pulling in opposite directions. Love, because what we shared was real in ways I couldn't deny. Regret, because it was never meant to be ours. I slipped out of bed, showered, and packed my things slowly, every motion deliberate, as if I could delay the inevitable ending. When he finally stirred, his voice was groggy, soft. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I whispered, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. He nodded, perhaps sensing what was coming but not wanting to say it out loud. The weight of everything unspoken filled the room until it was almost suffocating. The drive back home felt endless. We talked about small things, gas prices, work, even music. We avoided the elephant sitting quietly between us, that the world we had created in those few days was about to vanish the moment we crossed back into familiar streets and familiar lives. At one point, he reached for my hand. I let him hold it, briefly, before pulling away gently. "We can't," I said softly. He didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes fixed on the road. That silence between us said everything words couldn't. When we finally arrived home, the ordinary reality of life came rushing back. My husband's car in the driveway, the smell of freshly cut grass, the faint sound of our neighbor's radio. Everything looked exactly the same, yet I felt completely different. My husband came out to greet us, smiling, unaware of the storm beneath my calm exterior. I hugged him like I always did, only this time it felt distant. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer knew how to separate love from guilt. That evening, after dinner, I stood by the window and watched my stepson carry his bag to his car. He paused for a moment, looked back at me, and our eyes met, just for a second. There was no smile, no wave, just a silent understanding. This was goodbye. I went to bed that night and cried quietly, not out of self-pity, but out of realization. What I had done couldn't be erased, but it also couldn't be undone by more lies or self-denial. It was a piece of me now, a flawed, painful, human piece that would live in my heart forever. Over the months that followed, I tried to rebuild what was left of my marriage. I became more attentive, more patient, more aware. I channeled everything I felt, the guilt, the longing, the confusion, into becoming better. But there were moments, small, fleeting ones, when a song or a scent or a stretch of open highway would bring him back to me. And in those moments, I didn't hate myself. I didn't romanticize what happened either. I simply remembered, because for all the wrong reasons, that trip reminded me I was still alive, still capable of feeling, still human in ways I had forgotten. Years later, when I look back, I don't see it as a story of betrayal anymore. I see it as a story of awakening, one born out of loneliness, mistakes, and a hunger for connection that went too far. Would I do it again? No, but would I erase it? I can't, because some lessons are written not in ink, but in the quiet ache of memory. So, this is my confession, not for forgiveness, but for truth. The trip changed me in ways no one will ever know. And though I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make peace with it, part of me will always remember that moment, the silence, the goodbye, and the echo of something that once felt like love. A married woman's anonymous confession reveals how one road trip with her stepson changed everything, a bittersweet tale of forbidden connection, guilt, and emotional rediscovery. A 2025 true infidelity story about choices, consequences, and the silent goodbyes that never leave us. This story is based on a true-life confession shared anonymously. Names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of all individuals involved. The purpose of this story is not to promote or glorify infidelity but to explore real human emotions, loneliness, regret, and the consequences of choices. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you so much for listening to this story till the end. Heartbreak. If this story touched you, made you reflect, or reminded you how fragile human emotions can be, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us keep sharing more real-life confessions, stories of love, betrayal, regret, and rediscovery. Remember, sometimes, the biggest lessons come wrapped in silence and mistakes. None of us are perfect, and sometimes the only way to heal is to tell the truth, even if it hurts. Speech balloon, tell me in the comments, Have you ever experienced something that changed your life forever but you could never talk about it? Your story might help someone else heal too. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode of True Infidelity Confessions. Until next time, stay honest, stay kind, and remember, every secret has a heartbeat. Heartbreak.